And I want you to paint this name on the nose of your ship. Leper Colony. Because in it, you're going to get every deadbeat in the outfit.
Welcome to today's show. My name is John. As always, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Also, there are links to social media in the podcast show notes. You can also go to classicmovierev.com to read notes, bios, and other random movie thoughts. Today's movie is 12 O'Clock High, 1949, a contender for the greatest war movie ever, yet it shows very little violence. This film is often hailed as one of the greatest management training films ever made and has been used by most of the U.S. military at one time or the other. The author of the book that this movie is based on, Cy Bartlett, was the lead bombardier on the first bombing mission over Berlin in March 1942 and was thus the first American to drop bombs on Berlin during World War II. This movie was planned to be shot in color, but to match the airfield and actual combat footage from both sides, it was decided that it should be shot in black and white. The film is also unique as it only has a score at the beginning and end. Dean Jagger won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor, and Thomas T. Moulton won the Best Sound Recording Oscar. The film was nominated for Best Picture, and Gregory Peck was nominated for Best Actor, but neither of these was a winner. This great film has a 7.8 rating on IMDb.com and a 96% on the Tomato Meter with 87% audience approval at RottenTomatoes.com. The RottenTomatoes.com score would seem to be the most accurate. New York Times film critic Bosley Carruthers said in the January 28, 1950 article titled 12 O'Clock High, 1949, quote, "The saga of our air forces and their accomplishments in the recent war already has inspired a number of pictures, some fine, some not so good, in which contemplations have been focused upon individuals from sergeants to top brass. But there hasn't yet been one from Hollywood which could compare in rugged realism and punch to 12 O'Clock High, a top-flight drama." I guess he meant a pun there. This tremendously vivid, fictional story of a young general, towards the end of 1942, takes command of a bomber group operating from a base in England and elevates it from bleak depression to a peak of aggressiveness and pride, has conspicuously dramatic integrity, genuine emotional appeal, and a sense of the mood of an air base that absorbs and amuses the mind. Inevitably, this picture, since its hero is of the brass and its locale is centered and maintained at an 8th Air Force bomber base, is bound to provoke comparison with Command Decision, another fine film released last year, which told the story of a general's bout with high command. The comparison should not be unflattering, but it is not really justified, and the main points of similarity are coincidental, no more. For not only is the situation which confronts the hero of this film on a tactical, personal level, not on the level of command, but it is a situation that compels his weight to be thrown at his subordinates and not at the brass. And the consequence of this dire necessity is tension of a much more personal sort and dramatic situations in which the emotional conflicts are close and direct." Unquote. Carruthers really got to the heart of the matter when talking about Command Decision 1948 and 12 O'Clock High 1949. Command Decision 1948 was about a commander doing what is required for the job, and they focus only on how it affects the commander upward. 12 O'Clock High 1949 is upper command forcing a mission downward and the effect it has on the officers and men. It's a much more personal experience. The entire premise of 12 O'Clock High 1949 is that the unit does not have enough discipline to complete their mission. If the commander can drive them hard enough, daylight precision bombing will be successful. However, there are problems with this statement. In reality, daylight precision bombing was tested in the Southwest, where it is very rarely clouded. Bombing in Germany presented the bombardiers with around 200 days a year of cloudy conditions. But the real issue is that daylight precision bombing will not work unless the bombers are protected by fighters. So daylight precision bombing was untenable until long-range fighter cover was available to and from the target. This didn't happen until after D-Day, when the Allies landed in France and the American Army and Italy pushed far enough north to allow fighters to fly into German airspace. Actors.
Right, and I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Gregory Peck played the lead as General Savage. Peck was covered in episode 147, Maroon, 1969. Hugh Marlowe was great as Lieutenant Colonel Ben Gately, the leader of the leper colony. Marlowe was covered in episode 28, World Without End, 1956. Dean Jagger was amazing as Major Stovall, a World War I retread. Jagger was covered in episode 94, White Christmas, 1954. Major Stovall is based on World War I ace William Howard Stovall. Stovall shot down 6 planes in World War I and returned as a colonel and deputy chief of staff for personnel in the 8th Air Force during World War II. Bert Freed, Kenneth Tobey, and Don Hicks of episode 73, Billy Jack, 1971, all showed up in bit parts. Cary and Meryl played Colonel Davenport. Meryl was born in Connecticut in 1915. He attended Bowdoin and Trinity College. During college, he began acting in summer stock. In 1941, he joined the Army Special Services, never to be confused with the Special Forces. Following his service, he worked in theater. He was cast in All About Eve 1950, where he met his soon-to-be second wife, Betty Davis. His best-known films are 12 O'Clock High 1949, Where the Sidewalk Ends 1950, Mysterious Island 1961, and The Woman Who Wouldn't Die 1965. Meryl died at the age of 74. Millard Mitchell played the role of General Pritchard. Mitchell was born in 1903 in Havana, Cuba, to American parents. He was a popular radio actor in the 1930s and began appearing in short films. The first film he made in Hollywood was Mr. and Mrs. North, 1942. He began appearing in movies playing sarcastic characters. He was in The Naked Spur, 1953, as an old prospector, and in My Six Convicts, 1952. But he is probably best remembered for playing the movie mogul in Singing in the Rain, 1952. A lifelong smoker, he died early of lung cancer in 1953 at the age of 50. John Kellogg played Major Cobb. Kellogg was born in Hollywood in 1916. Some of his better-known movies are The Pride of the Yankees, 1942, A Walk in the Sun, 1945, 12 O'Clock High, 1949, and The Greatest Show on Earth, 1952. Kellogg died in 2002. This character was based on Colonel Paul Tibbets, the man that flew the Enola Gay, dropping the first atomic bomb used in combat onto the city of Hiroshima, Japan in 1945. Robert Arthur played Sergeant McElhaney. Arthur was born in Washington in 1925. He won a high school contest to become a radio announcer before becoming an actor. After attending the University of Washington, he began playing a baby-faced youngster in films. His better-known films include Mother Wore Tights, 1947, Yellow Sky, 1948, 12 O'Clock High, 1949, Ace in the Hole, 1951, and Take the High Ground, 1953. Arthur quit acting in the 60s and became an insurance salesman. In the 70s, he ran Project Rainbow. Arthur died in 2008. Story.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
4 years after the end of World War II, an American, Harvey Stovall, Dean Jagger, is in London buying a hat. He is having a good time with the slower pace of life.
Stovall? I hope you enjoyed the hat, Mr. Stovall, and a pleasant voyage home to you.
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank you for something else, too. Well, back home, I'd buy a hat in 5 minutes. Thank you for a most enjoyable hour and 40 minutes.
It was a pleasure.
While admiring his hat in a store window, he notices a Robin Hood Toby mug. On the mug, Robin Hood is wearing a bandit mask. Stovall asks the store owner where the mug came from and is told Archbury. Without pause, he says he will buy it. Stovall treats the old jug like it's a treasure and has it carefully packed. He then takes the package by train to Archbury. Stovall then rides a bike with the package in the basket out to a now abandoned airfield. When he gets to the end of the runway, the soundtrack begins to revive the sounds of the Air Force as it was during the war. Only a few of the buildings remain. As Stovall cleans his glasses, he can hear the sound of a B-17 Flying Fortress cranking and the wind blows the field. He remembers a time during World War II when a squadron of B-17s were landing at the field and the story begins. Stovall was part of the 918th Bombing Group of the U.S. Army Air Corps. The ground crew is shooting flares to help the planes land. One B-17 comes in with its wheels up for a belly landing. A stunt pilot, Paul Mance, was paid $4,500 to crash the plane. It remained the highest paid amount for a single stunt for quite a while. The men that come out of the plane are very upset as the wounded are brought out. The injured man had a shattered leg and his brain was exposed.
I wouldn't believe it if I wasn't looking at it. You can see his brain. It's 20 millimeter hit him.
The other crew members had to sit on him. This is based on an actual occurrence. Major Stovall and Group Commander Colonel Davenport, Gary Meryl, come to the plane, and Davenport is very upset by what he sees. There is an arm from one of the men inside the plane as well. Stovall does the job of removing the arm. The men are being debriefed about their flight. Lieutenant Bishop, Robert Patton, is too upset to talk. Davenport is feeling the grief as well. Bishop had to fight the wounded man for control of the plane for 2 hours. Davenport decides to submit Lieutenant Bishop for the Medal of Honor. Stovall is sitting in his administration room when Colonel Ben Gately, Hugh Marlowe, comes in looking for the commander. Gately is very cynical and grumbles a lot. It is 1942, and the 918th Bombing Group is one of the first groups to take heavy combat losses. The German propaganda radio even calls them a hard luck unit, and they are beginning to feel like they are. Major Stovall begins writing letters to the families of the day's dead. Colonel Davenport comes in, and Gately tells him that they are being sent in again the next day. Davenport is wound up so tight he is about to pop. The order calls for a maximum effort and says they should bomb from 9,000 feet. The flight surgeon is worried about the commander and the crews. Gately thinks the 9,000 feet is a mistake. Davenport goes to see his friend about the altitude. Brigadier General Frank Savage, Gregory Peck, is the Assistant Chief of Staff for Operations. Savage has been getting grief from everyone about the altitude order.
Commander, you didn't lead the first 10 missions for nothing. Why couldn't you tell him what it'll be like? You could tell him
Keith, I signed the field order.
Why? That's what I want to know.
All right, I'll spell it for you. We haven't been penetrating the concrete in those sub-pens, Keith. Now, we can't get concentration and accuracy from 19,000. We've got to go in once down low to see if we can get the job done in one trip instead of fighting our way to the target 5 times and back for nothing.
Savage gives a pair of lined boots to Davenport. Savage wants to help the group, but Davenport thinks it's because leadership doesn't care. Davenport freaks out, and Savage thinks he's about to snap. Savage goes to see Major General Patrick Pritchard, Millard Mitchell, who is the commanding general of the 8th Bombing Command. Pritchard thinks there's a problem with the 918th, and finally, Savage agrees that Davenport is too close to the men to command. Pritchard and Savage leave for Archbury Field. Davenport briefs Pritchard on the mission and why they were 3 minutes late. Zimmerman, a young navigator, takes responsibility. Davenport doesn't want to relieve the navigator because his parents were German sympathizers and he is carrying a load of guilt. Pritchard relieves Davenport and has Davenport moved to his staff. Another commander will be sent down. Stovall gets the word that the unit is standing down until the new commander arrives. They are all shocked as they deeply respected Davenport. On the way back, Pritchard gives Savage the word that he will be the new commander. Pritchard believes that the 918th has to be saved or precision daylight bombing will be lost. Savage is tasked with finding out how much the men in the group can take. Savage arrives the next day and starts busting chops. He rips the MP, Kenneth Toby, at the front gate.
You know me, soldier?
No, sir.
Then why are you admitting me to this station?
I thought it was a staff car, sir.
Gehrig could have been in it. There's my AGO card.
The general may proceed, sir.
From now on, you'll check everyone who enters, and without exception. Take a good look at me. If you or any man on this post passes me up again without saluting, even if I'm a block away, you'll wonder what fell on you.
Inside headquarters, he busts Sergeant McElhaney, Robert Arthur, down to a private for not having his shirt on. Sergeant McElhaney's character is based on Sergeant Donald Blevin, who in 1943 was shot down and became a POW. After the war, he and fellow POW Edmund Trzynski wrote the play that the movie Stalag 17, 1953 was based upon. Savage finds out that the navigator Zimmerman committed suicide and the air exec Gately has left the station. Stovall is at the officers' club drinking. Savage sends for him. Stovall comes in and he is weaving side to side. Savage orders that Gately be arrested. All leaves are canceled, squadron commanders have to return to the station, and all combat crews have an 8 a.m. briefing. Gately is brought in under guard. Savage recounts that Gately is the son of a general and the grandson of another. He is also a graduate of West Point and has the most 4-engine time of anyone in the group. Savage tells Gately he could have taken the load off of Davenport, but he has only flown 3 missions. Savage tells Gately that he was in command when Davenport was relieved. Savage calls him yellow and a traitor.
As far as I'm concerned, you're yellow. A traitor to yourself, to this group, to the uniform you wear. I hate a man like you so much that I'm going to get your head down in the mud and trample it. I'm going to make you wish you'd never been born.
If that's all, sir.
I'm just getting started. And I want you to paint this name on the nose of your ship. Leper Colony. Because in it, you're going to get every deadbeat in the outfit. If there's a bombardier who can't hit his plate with his fork, you get him. If there's a navigator who can't find the men's room, you get him because you rate him.
Savage says he will make Gately wish he'd never been born, and he demotes him to airplane commander. He orders Gately to name his plane the Leper Colony, and everyone that fouls up will be assigned to it. Gately says he will complain. Savage calls General Pritchard, and Gately decides not to drag his family through the mud. Savage is thinking of making Major Cobb, John Kellogg, air exec, but Stovall is evasive when he asks about Cobb. Private McElhaney is assigned as Savage's driver, and he is promoted back to sergeant. Savage gets a beer in the officers' club, and Cobb is there. Cobb is a hard case. Savage closes the club until further notice. He makes Cobb air exec. The next morning, Savage gives a briefing to the flight crews. He tells them to stop feeling sorry for themselves, and they are already dead.
But I can tell you now one reason I think you've been having hard luck. I saw it in your faces last night. I can see it there now. You've been looking at a lot of air lately. You think you ought to have a rest. In short, you're sorry for yourselves. Fear is normal. But stop worrying about it and about yourselves. Stop making plans. Forget about going home. Consider yourselves already dead.
He begins making them go through practice flying. He says anyone that can't handle it is to come to his office to apply for a transfer. Stovall shows that he is part of Savage's team. Cobb is with the team too, and the flight surgeon is told to make all the men fly. Bishop, who was recommended for the Medal of Honor the previous day, comes in as the spokesman for the pilots. All of the pilots want to transfer. Savage says for them to put in their request, but in the meantime, they will practice flying. Stovall tells him that he fought in World War I. He also tells Savage that he will slow down the transfer request to give Savage the time to get through to the men.
I'm a lawyer by trade. I think I'm a good one. When a good lawyer takes on a client, he does it because he believes in the client's case.
I need time before those transfers go through.
It'll take those squadron adjutants at least 2 days to draw up all those requests. Might be 3 days before I could get around to them. Take a couple of days to check them. Then those squadron adjutants are pretty sloppy sometimes, and I certainly don't want this group criticized for sloppy paperwork. Do you, General?
Couldn't permit it.
The time I recheck them, it'll be 10 days anyway before they can be ready for signature.
There can be trouble in this.
I don't think so, sir. I never heard of a jury convicting the lawyer.
Gately becomes the most demanding plane commander as he doesn't want any extra heat.
Now, in case any of you aren't clear as to what this is all about, I'm supposed to be a deadbeat. And so are you. That's why you were assigned to me, the leper colony. How do you like it? Well, you'll like it a lot less the first mistake you make. We've got a blowtorch turned our way, and nobody's going to shove me into it.
On their first training run, Savage flies in the leper colony. The men are grouchy about practice. Finally, the group gets mission orders. Stovall goes to the officers' club and turns to Robin Hood Toby to face out. This is a sign that they have a mission. Savage leads 2 missions, and they only lose 1 airplane. The men are still not responding. Savage orders practice bombing. A bombardier has been bombing late, and he is sent to the leper colony. Another man that broke formation is assigned to the leper colony. The men ask about their transfers, but Savage doesn't respond. Davenport comes down to visit. Davenport asks about the transfers and says the Inspector General may be coming to investigate. Davenport says Savage should ease up on the men. Savage says no dice. The Toby mug is turned again. During the mission, Pritchard sends a recall because of weather. All of the groups except the 918th return. Savage fakes a radio malfunction and successfully bombs the target as a single group. Pritchard chews a few pounds out of Savage's butt. Savage finally gets Pritchard to give the group a distinguished unit citation for the mission. Stovall talks to the men after the commendation, but he can't tell if they still hate Savage. Savage calls Bishop and talks to him about the transfer. Bishop says they can't see the bigger picture. He says he wants out of flying. Savage explains that they are guinea pigs and more air power will come from what they do. When the Inspector General finally shows up, the pilots all withdraw their request for transfer and Savage is saved. Cobb tells the good news and that Bishop was in lead of the men. Savage shows his first signs of emotion. Savage says he is going to drive the men harder. A few missions later, they get their first mission over Germany, attacking Wilhelmshaven. Savage leads the mission, and there are many stowaways along for the trip. When the planes come back, Sergeant McElhaney is demoted to private for going along as a gunner. Savage finds out that Stovall and the chaplain went along as well.
There's one more thing about McElhaney, kind of awkward. He's just been officially credited with 2 FWs destroyed and 1 Bravo.
Wobbly, Stovall, come over here. Well, you're pretty proud of yourselves, I suppose. Well, let me tell you...
I was hoping the General wouldn't go into this right now. I think I'm suffering from combat fatigue.
Harvey, I'm going to weaken just this once. I'll probably live to regret it. Did you hit anything up there, Harvey?
Well, sir, my glasses were frosted over some, but I think I got a piece of one.
Ours or theirs?
He gives McElhaney his sergeant stripes back because he shot down 2 ME-262s. Gately and the leper colony ditch-landed in the English Channel. 3 missions later, Bishop's plane is lost over Germany. Savage again shows emotion. Cobb is shook up by the death of Bishop. The flight surgeon tells Savage that Gately has flown 3 missions with a fractured spine. Savage goes to see Gately in the hospital, and he's proud of the fine officer he has become. Gately is happy with what Savage has done for him.
I was just going to say, anything you want? Something I can send you?
Not a thing, General. I've got everything I need.
You just let us know if you do need anything.
Thank you, sir.
Looks like I'll have to rate you a Class A customer, Colonel. I just learned you're something extra special.
Pritchard gets the mission to bomb the ball bearing factory deep inside of Germany, far beyond Allied fighter cover. Pritchard wants Savage to come back to his staff job. Savage doesn't feel he can leave the group yet. Pritchard warns Savage that he is getting too close to the men. Pritchard agrees to let him stay with the group longer. Pritchard has Davenport look for a new commander in case Savage fails. Savage leads another mission, and Gately is no longer flying the leper colony. Davenport is waiting at the 918th and hears that the Germans have ordered the largest number of fighters ever in response to an attack. The British liaison said that the German pilots are ordered to ram the bombers. However, this did not happen until the very end of the war, 2 years after the raid that this mission is based on. Fighters swarmed the bombers. During the fighting, Cobb is killed. In spite of the losses, the mission is a success. This movie has some great scenes of actual World War II aerial combat at this point. Davenport tells Savage that Pritchard was on the raid as well. Back on the ground, Stovall is drunk and he says he can't remember the faces of the dead. The next day, Savage goes to his airplane, but has trouble with his gear and can't lift himself into the plane. He is shaking and confused. Now we would recognize this as PTSD. Gately takes over, but Savage doesn't recognize him. Savage continues to freak out. As they wait for the planes to return, Savage becomes catatonic. Davenport and the flight surgeon wait with Savage until they get the word that the target has been destroyed. Davenport tells Savage that he has done all he could. When the plane engines are heard overhead, Savage lets go and falls asleep. It is 1949 and Stovall places the Toby mug in the old officers' club. He slowly rides away on his bike. Notes:
This will be on the test.
The Robin Hood Toby mug showed up in the Valley of the Dolls 1967, but has since disappeared. Some of the planes that were used for this film were also used during the atomic test on Bikini Atoll in 1946, and the crews were limited in how long they could stay inside. Nice. The title 12 o'clock high has a very specific meaning. If you're sitting in the pilot's seat, straight out would be 12 o'clock. Your right wing would be 3 o'clock, and 9 o'clock would be down your left wing. 6 o'clock would be directly behind the plane. Then you add high, low, or even, and you can quickly point out a direction and an elevation. So 1 o'clock low would be slightly to the right and down. The system allowed the rest of the crew to quickly spot an enemy, a bit of time that can make the difference between living and dying. By the Korean War, American pilots were flying jets with a large aft exhaust port. This became known as your zero in addition to still being called your six. As in, I have a bogey on my zero, tail. One tale from this war tells of a pilot repeatedly screaming into the microphone that he had a bogey on his zero. A calm voice over the radio told him to shut up and die like a man.
Game over, man. It's game over.
World famous short summary, shut up and die like a man. I hope you enjoyed today's movie. I really appreciate you spending the time listening. You can find connections to social media and email on my site at classicmovierev.com. There are links in the podcast show notes as well. This is an independent show, and there are lots of things that you can do to help out. First, and most importantly, jump over to Apple Podcast and give me a review. It really helps the show get found. If you want to comment, help, or recommend a movie, email me. Beware the Moors.